Good morning, YouTube. Awesome to be with you this morning. Finding it interesting that I have been logged out of all of my different accounts this morning, so it's not quite so readily available for me to be able to do what I normally do in terms of recording and streaming to Facebook and YouTube too. But we're just going to go with it anyway and say that we're going to listen to Shimmer Johnson's Priceless song from album 22 while I do my handstands, since I'll be interviewing her on Tuesday. So enjoy.
There's this masculine beauty that makes me me. Colored glass in a frame that's not meant to be. Shattered pieces on the floor. And the scenes ended in insecurity. Lost my words and my script, nothing left to read. Ancient stories left unsaid. You always made me feel so beautiful. Then you tear it out like a centerfold. I am priceless. Can you see this? I didn't lose you, you lost me. You searched for me inside the sea of lost dreams. You won't find me there. I woke up in a different place, entirely a different state of my mind. You won't find me there. As this breath on the wind that can carry me through the storms and the rains that were drowning me, I can almost feel the sun. Isolation has ground my ability to see the truth where I was and where I'm meant to be. Lead me to my grace. You always made me feel so beautiful. Then you tear it out like a centerfold. I am priceless. Can't you see this? You always made me feel not powerful, like the dark underneath your waterfall. I am priceless. I can see this. Won't let anybody tear me down. Won't let no one tear me to the ground. Won't let no one tear me down. Tear me down. Won't let anybody tear me down. Won't let no one tear me to the ground. Won't let no one tear me down. Tear me down. Tear me down. It's over now. I didn't lose you, you lost me. You searched for me inside the sea of lost dreams. You won't find me there. I woke up in a different place, entirely a different state of my mind. You won't find me there.
Shimmer Johnson, Priceless, on the Album 22 project that I have been helping to collaborate on over these last 6 months. A project that started from nothing, an idea, and then has evolved to having 22 contributing artists, and actually 2 more because myself and Denise Exler teamed up with Eric Vasquez, whose interview I just got loaded up this morning before I came live to you here. So I just share that because we can really do magical things if only we release our expectation as to how things need to be so that we can get ourselves in this present moment, the one where all time is happening now in this multidimensional layer cake of time, the fictitious creation that has been designed to make us think we are less than we actually are, needing to chronologically age ourselves when the truth is that courage or any of these things that truly require heart and the willingness to express our timelessness, because our souls are eternal. And as God sparks incarnated into physical form, vessels that transport us through this world if we can really understand that our chronological age does not reflect necessarily or respect all that we actually came here with, and an idea that is birthed out of necessity because it came to us as a what about possibly if that were actually possible? Is literally the question I asked Jared Wade when we agreed to create this experience. And now we have amazing people involved, and it's such an honor and privilege to be part of this project. So I hope that that inspires you to be willing to try something, because ultimately that's what we've come here for on this playground of life. It's like a chessboard. It's all happening right now, and it's like all of us are the dots on the map. So they've always taught us connect the dots in terms of information. And yes, that is important too. But the fact that we have overlooked is that the dots are actually you and me and all of the others who can see each other, and to glean that piece of the puzzle that you carry, or that I carry, or that someone else carries. And for us to be able to connect those dots, our light, the God sparks within, the grand overall designer that created each of us. And from my understanding, the Big Bang Theory actually is the spark of creation. When basically Source, which is all things, wanted to experience itself. And you can't experience yourself if you're all things. And so in order to create contrast, which is very useful even though we don't enjoy the experience of it, the Big Bang Theory took place and broke itself into all kinds of billions of pieces, trillions of pieces. And then each of those pieces, you and me and all the other yous out there too, each of them, us, became the individuated expressions of that grand overall creator that got to experience itself as us. Therefore, we are the individuated expressions of that grand overall designer. How phenomenal is that to even imagine, which is all we can really do, because in truth, we feel truth. Truth has a resonance. It's about really understanding that everything is vibrational, everything is frequency, including our feelings, which I am so grateful because in the 4 years that I've been working on the book that rewrote me before the world got to see the version that I'll finally restart and finish this time, which I have a deadline in mind that I'll keep to myself, because what I have learned is about bleeding out my creativity. And I say this because I am a reflection of you. So this may be useful information for you to keep in mind if you do have a creative baby you want to birth too. And basically my cat just came out around the corner in that moment, Mr. Julius Romeo. I love this guy. He has been here for me through all of my darkest moments, especially during the time while I've been writing my book that I finished 3 times, but deemed each of those not good enough because I took on somebody else's perspective that didn't understand it because they're not even into any of the things that I was into. And yet, because of their professional criteria or qualifications, I should say, they suggested that what I had written was not easily understandable, which they weren't wrong, but I have since learned so much as to why I allowed, even though I finished the book 3 times, each of those not to be good enough until now, where I can say, okay, what I will write is going to be better because I am an improved version of me, as you are too. And ultimately, what I will write now brings all of that in, because in this book, those versions too, I wrote of the universal story, I say at 1133, which is a master number where you have a duplicating number, which is actually reflective of the power of the pattern, which a 1 is about new beginnings and 3 would be like the Trinity, or the victim triangle with the rescuer and the persecutor as the spectrums that we're constantly bouncing around on, such as in the story of not enough, when we think that we are not good enough or smart enough or whatever it is, then that when we're bouncing around there, we're automatically punishing ourselves. Why? It is time for us to actually flip that triangle upwards so that the largest part is now on the bottom, so that we have a strong foundation and we can bring in the hero and the guardian and the caretaker and make it into an empowered spectrum, which I'm still finding the words for. So I don't have those to share with you specifically just yet, but I'm working on it. And all of this, it's great to have you here this morning. And all of this is to simply say, when you're working on something and you share it with people prematurely that don't understand your vision, because we see it first and then we have to create it, but somebody else can't see it and they can't see into our mind to understand or appreciate the beauty of what we're trying to birth. And so they judge it. And those judgments oftentimes come from their own insecurities, not feeling safe within themselves because somebody else judged them. And then they took on those judgments and then grew those judgments so that then they want to make you unsafe too, because they just want to keep you safe. But keeping you safe is simply keeping you in a comfort zone that's far too small for you, as I experienced while going through all that I did in order to be able to finally get out the book that you'll see one day. And I'm not going to say more about that simply because if I do, then I put expectations on myself that I then get scared to meet, as you may find yourself doing too. So just be very wary and use that as the lesson for today on self-compassion, to not bleed out your creative desires or the creative babies that are in your imagination for you to bring into form once it crosses the bridge of the heart. And that is a teaching Carolyn Mace shared at one of the retreats that I went to in Sedona back in 2017. That was an amazing experience about the power of words, the power of choice, I believe that workshop was. And it was a fascinating experience that I really left feeling unsettled because I'd stretched myself in order to go. I got there. I wanted the picture with the one that I'd paid all those thousands of dollars to go and see. And she denied me a picture 3 times. And I had to really work through my own ego because it was just like, are you kidding me? Like, I'd been part of the John Maxwell team and been to, I don't know how many events by that point, around 10, and got pictures with John and the faculty, and obviously I was in a relationship with one of the mentors in the program for 4 years, and so I had a different level of access to what many in the program maybe did. But that experience was so different from when then I paid multiple thousands of dollars to get myself to Sedona and the retreat that Carolyn was hosting. And then when she denied me the picture, and I was so used to being able to get the pictures with the faculty, it was a really big deal for me. And I had to really unpack that egoically. But that is time, that's story for another time. But in that event, one of the things that she had brought up that I'd heard her say in other videos that I had seen her do on YouTube is about how our inspired ideas come in through the chakra system. And so we actually receive the inspired idea through the crown. And then we enter down into the third eye, which is your intuition, and the teacher, your soul hired ahead of time to guide you through this life. And then you pass into the throat of self-expression. And then you get into the heart. And that is where the magnetic field is. And I'm learning more from the man that's helping me in putting together my notices for claiming my rights. As I open the door for the cat. And so with the notices, he's very switched on to will, because you have to be willing to actually take your power back, which is part of what I've really been learning in different language, because my book has been about the transformation of self-image. But the heart is actually where the magnetic field radiates from, and then takes us down into the belly, which is your self-image. It is your willpower, your self-esteem. And then you go into the sacral chakra of creativity, your sex and money, and then down into the root, which is your sense of belonging in the world. My dad's got a tractor going by. It's the beauty of being in the country. And sometimes I think, well, it's quite loud when the cars go by on the road that's far enough away to not be right next to the screen, and yet then you've got tractors, and it's like I could feel the shame of it not being a perfect setting and go inside, or I can just say I'm doing the best that I can, and I am a reflection of you, and all of what I do is really to give you and me too the opportunity to be graceful with ourselves, to have the self-compassion for us to be able to say, I got the idea, I saw what it could do, I spoke it, I felt it, I then experienced overstepping the bridge, which takes the ethereal idea into reality, which is what Carolyn shared, which is why I brought that teaching up. And then to go through the birthing canal of our creativity to then actually send it out through the root. And that is when it takes form in a new way, because we have allowed it to be born. And if we can't bypass the heart, then we can't actually get it down to start using it in this world in a real way. And so all of this is to say, you don't need to share your creative babies any sooner than what is required. And you only want to share that creative idea with somebody that either is in it with you and has the capacity to actually hold the space, or if you're in a relationship and you have to, but choosing your partners wisely, because we become the average of the ones we surround ourselves with. And today, I don't quite know what I'm going to do specifically when we come together, but what I felt was significant is that if you're in Canada as well, I'm on the QTAC committee now for, which is Church Universal and Triumphant Association of Canada, which is really helping to figure out how to awaken the light within the light bearers of the world, particularly in Canada specifically. And so this week, I kind of came on because of the Michael and Laura show that Michael Seegers and I have done, which if you haven't checked out any of those, the very first video I'd highly recommend because it's spiritual warfare and the nature of evil. E-veil, because I felt it was so important for where we are right now to really understand what's going on, as then the distraction goes by, the noise. But when there's a passing vehicle, I always take that to be a break in the train of thought to then have a new start too. So pay attention to the signs, symbols, and omens that come into your environment too. And actually, last week I did a video on my YouTube channel about that very thing. So it was about following the signs, symbols, and omens of the universe while I was driving. And I just felt like I needed to go live on video. I didn't do it actually on a live, but I turned the camera on while I was decreeing as I was driving, and I was doing I am presence, thou art master, which is a decree about bringing our highest self into the moment. So it's I am presence, thou art master, I am presence, clear the way, let thy light and all thy power take possession here this hour. Charge with victory's mastery, blaze blue lightning, blaze thy substance into this thy form descend, that perfection and its glory shall blaze forth and earth transcend. And if you do that 33 times, they say that you can actually bring miracles into your world because you're calling in the power of your I am that I am, which is the picture of God that each of us brought with us, that comes down through the Christ consciousness in between, which is what is to be seen in the second coming, when we actually are able to merge with the Christ consciousness that is in our DNA, but is separate and attached to a silver cord that then leads up to the I am that I am. And when we bring that down, we actually are no longer just operating from the humanly aspect of ourselves. And I was doing that decree while I was driving because it's a great use of my time, and ultimately I'd be in transit anyway, so I use that time to decree oftentimes. And so that was what I was doing in the moment when I felt like I should go live and I didn't specifically know what I would say. And then as I was turned it on and I was completing 3 rounds of the decree, because if you can't do 33, just do 3, and that is a good start. And I saw on the license plate opposite me, as soon as I was finished that 9/11 was on that plate. And so then it took me down another rabbit hole about Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, a book I highly recommend that I read last year on YouTube, actually. So you could actually check it out if you're interested. But when I saw the 911, it took me down the path, because in Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, he actually talks about how the universe speaks to us in signs, symbols, and omens. And when we actually learn how to recognize it, such as animals, for instance, animal symbolism is a creative power that comes into our awareness at exactly the moment that we need the symbolic message that animal has to deliver. So when you notice an animal cross your path, pay attention to what it was, and then go onto your internet browser and type in the animal and symbolism and see what the message was, because that's why it stood out for you. Especially if you kill an animal on the road, for instance, you hit a deer or you hit a bird or a rabbit or anything like that, that animal literally sacrificed itself for you to be able to get the message, because it wanted to make sure that it stood out for you. So I oftentimes will call on white light protection around me and my vehicle, and then also any of the animals that are in the area, just to create a blessing and safe space as I travel. And I didn't know all those years while I was calling on white light for protection. And truly, I do believe that it did help keep me safe in many circumstances where I could have not been. And in so doing, I didn't know that I was actually calling down my I am that I am presence, because that's what you actually do with the tube of light, which is another decree if you're interested in using That one is short and sweet. And if you call down your I am that I am presence every single day, then you can actually strengthen that force field. You can strengthen that force field around you. So it's, beloved, I am presence bright around me. Seal your tube of light from ascended master flame, called forth now in God's own name. Let it keep my temple free from all discord sent to me. I am calling forth violet fire to blaze and transmute all desire, keeping on in freedom's name till I am one with the violet flame. And that's the tube of light. And then if you can bring that in and around you, then it actually creates like a force field, which that's the white light of protection that I was calling in without knowing that I was doing that specifically. And then also Neo, for instance, in the Matrix, when he has the hand up and stops the bullets, that's what the tube of light can actually do for us if we strengthen it, which we do every single day by calling it in and using that simple decree that I just did for you. Which, if you're interested, I can certainly post it into the description. So you can use the prayer for, or the decree for, your tube of light, and also the I am that I am, and truly create miracles in your world, strengthen your connection, and make it so that it's not just the humanly aspect of yourself that's existing in this world, but actually you are embodying the energetic signature of the highest aspect of you and becoming more familiar and connected to that higher self that truly is here to guide us. That's why I always say your intuition is the tuition your soul paid ahead of time to make sure you had a teacher to guide you, which is the one within. Which also then goes to the saying, if you fail to go within, you will go without. Because truly, if we're always looking for the answers on the outside, which is how we've culturally, cult you rally with, been programmed to actually do, it's because that just puts our power outside of ourselves. And as a recovered person that doesn't give my power freely to those that do not deserve it or have not deserve of service, the ones that are not truly of service to my highest self, they don't deserve my power, nor do they deserve yours. And yet culturally, that's what we've been programmed to do, because that's how the weak ones stay in positions of elevated status, because we give them our power. And I learned that because of my own pattern of giving my power freely to those that I thought could wield it better than me. And then I found out that was not true. And getting checked into a mental institution for 2.5 weeks, where I got held after a 3-day voluntary hold that then turned into 2 weeks that were involuntary. I didn't understand about the first 3 days being when you have the ability to rescind any contract, because contract law is actually what we're working with when we agree, and consent is agreeance. Silence is consent. So not knowing our rights means that we don't have any, which is what that experience taught me. And when I really started to call back my power from places that I'd freely given it away before. And most people don't talk about these experiences, but I'd called myself into the police to report that the system was corrupt, and I suspected that they were in on it. And that sounded crazy and got me locked up. And ultimately I found out that while there are good officers, the system is not your friend, and the police are ultimately upholding their orders, and they need to keep the people in line. And so it was a crazy, mind-blowing experience. And I literally experienced, in the second place where they sent me overnight, that I truly believe is a science experiment, and the Stanford University experiment, where they had they basically got some patients to, wasn't even patients, it was an experiment where they had some of the participants sign up to be the prisoners, some to be the guards, and then they were tested on their willingness to enforce the measures. But they got really into their roles really fast, and things got real bad, and they needed to end the experiment early because it got so bad. And literally when they rolled me in on a gurney, because of course They have to show that you do not have the ability to maneuver yourself, because that's part of how they demonstrate your need to be in there as a ward of the courts. When you get representation, to be represented as your legal fiction, for instance, that's how they do it in the court system. But with the mental health system, from what I experienced, they had me overnight in one place. One of the doctors had literally told me to look up Goff's work, which was about holotropic breath therapy, or he founded holotropic breath therapy. And that was about reaching natural enlightenment, because I wasn't on anything and I hadn't even smoked weed in a month. So like my system was pure, like was clean, and I was connected, and I was out of this world, because truly I was riding the magic of the moment, which is in the heart when you're just in flow. And that is not what you know to be true, because there's no box that the truth can fit into when you're just in the magic of that. So all of these experiences really unraveled me, believe me, because I did them live too on Facebook, of course, right? If you know me, I just love the truth, and I respect the truth, and I don't respect lies. And what I understand, and I bet you do too, is that the truth is oblivious until made obvious when the lies are exposed. And so as one who was trying to expose the lies and say, or the lies, it didn't work out well for me, except it gave me eyes to see what was going on. And when they rolled me into the second place after the first place, where I thought that they understood what was going on, because the doctor had literally told me, look up Goff's work, on my phone, he said, give me your phone, typed in Goff, and then handed me the phone back and said, read that. I didn't understand that, like, he wasn't putting that in my case note as part of my testimony, or as part of the evidence as to what was going on for me and why I was in there. I had no idea that he was just saying, like, that's what you're going through, and you're about to go on a crazy journey. I didn't know. So now I would have a lot more to say in a different way. And I feel like I went through what I did because now collectively we're going through that too. And if we don't step up, claim our rights, then a lot more people are going to have the experience of getting stuck in the modern day witch hunt, which is what the mental health system is from my perspective. Humbly. But not even fully, because I got humbled a lot within that. But I found out that that's what it is. And in my heart of hearts, I believe truly, true lie, that that is what the Mental Health Act is all about. So when they took me to the next place, Hamilton down the mountain, 10th floor, it's seriously a science experiment. And that Stanford University experiment is literally, I came in and I experienced the paradigm. Like, I saw the overlay of how the guards and the patients were in reverse order, which at the time I'd been interviewing to be a corrections officer. So that did fit into my own personal narrative. But the fact they avoided eye contact with patients desperate for connection, and they told me that my lip balm, when I asked for it, they were doing something more important than my request. They'd get to it later if they could. They said that 3 times. And the first time I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to respond to people. And then the second time was like, oh, that's an intentional way to respond to people. And then the third time, when I got my mom, when her and her husband came in to visit me, and I got her to ask, and they said the same thing. It was like, and then her hands went up and she was so sorry. Of course they were too busy. It was like, I respond differently to authority figures that decline a basic fundamental right. Basically, maybe that's not a fundamental right. My lip balm really wasn't that important in the scheme of things, but it was just all very fascinating. And I'm grateful for the experience. And I'm grateful that I had my wits about me to actually be able to get myself out of it. So had I not been through that, would I look at the way that things have been going down with this pandemic, the way that I have? Absolutely not. And what I wanted to actually say this morning is about that whole divide and conquer strategy, which is a war technique that is currently playing out, because I have a Telegram group. If you're not part of it already, it's Peaceful Inner Warriors United group. And so please join over there so that then we can really have some conversations. I share the videos and messages that I do, and then other things in conversation too. Plus, I invite others to share perspectives and views that do not include the con video game drama that has been pervading our experience over the last 14 months, because ultimately we need to be dreaming a new dream together. And it doesn't involve the drama that they would have to be our reality, which is realistic evidence appearing legit in tomorrow's yesterday. No. So keep it out. And this morning, somebody couldn't help themselves and shared in there about how anybody that has taken the gene therapy, they're going to be dead within 2 years. And it was like, okay, so redirect and let's not actually stick with that, because that is a divide and conquer war strategy. That when we believe that, even though it came from a head official, we're putting our energy into that, and then we're going to become fearful of those that have chose to be injected. And that's a problem, because ultimately it's dividing and conquering us even before we understand fully what could be. And the other thing is it completely eliminates our ability to change it if we believe that. So I do not choose to believe that. And I live with one who chose to get the injection and will continue to get the next injection, and then the other ones that follow that, because as we've all heard, it's not going to just stop here. It's going to have to then have more, because it weakens the immune system, and ultimately then you'll need the top ups because of how it's destroying the natural immunity. But that is playing into this tactic and the strategy that is ultimately going to keep us divided, because we've all heard it's not safe for those that are not injected to be around those that are. And ultimately, we're all in a situation where there's so much cognitive dissonance, where there are two competing belief systems. There's the antis and the pros. And ultimately, that's just putting us into groupings that mean that when they come for the antis, then it's not Laura they're picking up, it's the antis. And that is not going to benefit any of us, because ultimately we are so much more powerful than we understand. And right now, there is just a whole lot of control and conformity that is being implemented. And that actually goes back to the Milgram Experiments, I believe it was called, where they had a teacher, a student, and an experimenter who had each of the roles of the teacher was to, when the student got the answer wrong, send an electric shock to the student. And the experimenter was the one that was giving the teacher the orders. And the teachers were actually administering shocks that were not true, not correct, to an actor who was just crying and screaming and begging for their life. And the experimenter was telling the teacher to keep going. And I experienced that in that second place that was the complete psyop, because I was literally opposite, my cell was opposite the eagle's nest, as they call it in the correction system, which this was no different, because I've done tours of prisons and I experienced, and I was interviewing to be a corrections officer, as I said, and my cell was opposite the eagle's nest, which was plexiglass. And I could see there were like 5 or 6 of them in there that were all avoiding eye contact. And they were so uncomfortable, because the men and women in that position that were the experimenter, or that were being told what to do by the experimenter, they literally were all trying to keep their eyes down and away from me, who was standing there with my arm raised, because I was letting them know that I wanted their attention, and I was doing it respectfully. And so I was just peering to see who would make eye contact with me as I raised my hand politely. And it took a good minute, 2 minutes for them to finally look up. And I was persistent, and so I got their attention and I got what I wanted. And it was just so fascinating because this Milgram experiment had it so that the teacher was administering the shocks to the student and resisting because I'm not going to kill this person, and no, I'm not, they're suffering, I'm not going to do this. But then the experimenter said, keep going. And he said, well, who's going to take responsibility, or who's going to be responsible for this? I am. You keep going. And they thought that they thought it would be a small percentage of people that actually followed through with the orders because of the torture that was involved. And what they found was that that was not the case. The majority of people actually kept up with it, which is absolute insanity, which by definition is doing the same thing again and again, expecting different results, compared to craziness, madness, that there's a spider web, which is very symbolically significant too for the web of interconnection. And craziness is different. So to be crazy is different. So I always, and at the time, even when I would do my lives while I was going through all of this, which then obviously took time to recover from my reputation and my self-image and all of that when I actually got myself out. But yeah, the web of interconnection is what literally was just a string right in front of me, because that's what we are for one another. Connecting the dots is connecting each other. So please, we don't know how long we've got on this planet. We don't know how long we've got to be free. We don't know how long we've got the ones that we love. And so instead of allowing all of these strategies and tactics to divide and conquer us even before we know for sure what the case is, why not put our intention into shifting it instead of letting their reality be what we see? And I say this because I do believe that we can truly change things for those who have bought into the propaganda because they're innocent and they're too busy, that they don't have time to go down all the rabbit holes that many of us have. And so offering compassion to those that are so fixated on what they're being told instead of what they feel and what they know, offer compassion, offer love. It's like, I love my papa, and I know that my being here offers him self-esteem boosts. And it's because we just don't talk about our differences specifically so much, because I don't want to plant seeds of fear in him further, because his system is already under attack from my perspective, which I may be wrong. But at the same time, if we can actually come together and intentionally uplift ourselves as a collective, we can create so much more power that even though the experts say they're doomed, what if we could change that? And we already know that there's advanced technologies that have not been revealed to the public that truly we could actually use to help heal the ones that succumb to the peer pressure, and do it for the greater good and the insanity of all of what we're told culturally. And it's just not okay. And yet, if we play into that narrative, we lose our power. And I don't think that that's in our best interest. So all of these are my perspectives, and I want to wrap up the message soon, but I also wanted to share the message that I got from being part of the QTAC committee. And it's Canada's destiny as a nation, which is just so spectacular to understand. I want to make sure that I share a piece of it that is actually going to benefit, and I think this is the one. So on Decree 12009, Mother actually describes this city foursquare is clearing the way for divine plan to manifest for Saint Germain and the great divine director for the Golden Age. Now, I'll be honest, and I'll say that I am very much still on the quest for truth, and I don't believe that there is one path. And so I share this because I am also really wanting to better understand how it all fits together, because there has been, I say at 44, there has been a corruption of the New Age movement, and there is a lot of propaganda that is Luciferian and satanic, and I'm not into any of that. So I'm just stating that I'm doing the best that I can to find the truth. And I'm finding that there are subtle deceptions that are in really good things, just like with the good book. It's like if 99% of it is true, but 1% has an agenda that is not true, and you don't know how to discern the 1% from the 99, then how do you trust any of it? So I say that because I'm on a quest. And so this week I'm actually going to be interviewing Richard Enos about the letters to Lucifer that he wrote a 7-part series on, because I want to understand who Lucifer is. And I want to understand, because I've heard Lucifer, Satan, and Devil, LSD, as part of the corruption. And so I share this because I know that Saint Germain and Marie Blavatsky are, she had a newsletter called Lucifer, and she's one of the teachings with the Ascended Masters, and Mother is Elizabeth Clare Prophet, which Summit Lighthouse and Summit University, those are connected to and founded by Mark Prophet and then Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And I don't fully resonate with calling anyone mother other than my own. And I don't call her mother, I call her mom. But there is the mother archetype that we have to really figure out how to move into the sacred aspect instead of the scared one. So that being said, I'll share this because it could be of value. And if you're interested in the whole thing, I'd be happy to send it over. But universal Christ within our hearts, we present ourselves as ambassadors of light and representatives of this people of Canada and of the United States. We come together then in the awareness of thy will for this North American continent. Let the power of thy Holy Spirit, the power of the Mother Flame, come forth now for adjudication and for the righting of all wrong, that in this season and in this cycle, commencing the glorious age of Saint Germain, there might be the removal of all obstacles to the divine plan of the great divine director and the Elohim for these evolutions. Lord God Almighty, we stand this day knowing that the 7th root race and those who come after us may reap the benefit of our work and have a better opportunity, a clean slate on which to build, truly to build after the patterns of the heavenly. That resonates mostly for me, and I'm interested in just better understanding elements of that, such as the Golden Age and the Mother Flame and Saint Germain and the Great Divine Director and the 7th root race. So I'm going to find those answers for myself, and I'll share those to the best of my ability, because that's why I started the Michael and Laura show in the first place. I had questions, and Michael Seegers had spent 9 hours with me the first time that we connected. And it was just like, I appreciate your willingness to pour into me that way. And then additionally, I feel like more people would benefit from being able to access your insights the way that you've poured into me so freely. So what if we came together on video and I ask the questions that I'm curious about, and then other people can learn from the questions that I ask and the answers that you give. And so that's kind of how the Michael and Laura show started in the first place. And so I'm going to be finding out more questions, or finding more questions, finding more answers. And then on top of that, I've now got more sources to gain that information from, because I am involved with the QTAC committee now. And so there's phenomenal people. I'm connecting with a woman on the committee this afternoon, in fact, out of Calgary. I say at 10:55, which I always say Archangel Michael's number is 55 and 10 is mine. So I love that. And so I'm going to be asking her some questions, and then talking with the man who's helping me with understanding law by actually advocating for myself and claiming my rights through the notice process, and then all else that is going on with that too. So I'm happy to share and feel like that's part of what I'm here for. And so I will gladly share that with you. But I do also say that if we can bring in some of these higher level elements and aspects of our own self, the divine self, our holy self, to become whole and complete in and of ourselves again, we can truly be like what Bruce Lipton talks about as the honeymoon effect. And we can become noble gas partners, which mean that we're balanced and complete in and of ourselves rather than being a chemical that is unbalanced and has an unbalanced outer ring that then finds another unbalanced outer ring chemical to then become a chemical compound with, so that the dysfunction completes the other for a while, until then eventually the dysfunction starts to irritate both parties, and then the honeymoon effect is over and you're stuck in a dysfunctional relationship. So I'd rather move myself, and have been working to diligently for many years, and have gotten to a good space, and definitely still have my own stuff and shadow to work through and process and deal with. But ultimately, I've very much been committed to becoming a noble gas partner. And if more of us can really focus on becoming whole and complete in and of ourselves, then the dating pool opens up more, which is a wonderful thing for conscious singles, which I had an idea years ago to actually create a conscious singles group, because truly it's difficult to find people on our wavelength when we choose to elevate our consciousness and our awareness to a higher level. But everything has its time and its place, and it hasn't been right to do that at this point. But I am so grateful to be finding more people that I can ask questions to, such as with Richard Enos. That interview will be on Wednesday this week. And on Tuesday night, I'm going to be interviewing Shimmer Johnson, who did the song that I started out our video today with. And Eric Vasquez, his video is already up from the interview we did for the Album 22 project as well. So check that out after you've enjoyed this. Please do give it a like if you would, to help with my algorithms. If you find somebody that comes to mind that may benefit from what I've shared today, I would appreciate your sharing the message, because the more people that get introduced to me while I still have this platform, the more people I can plant seeds to say, what does that mean to you? What does it mean for you? And what will you do with it in their consciousness? Because ultimately that's what it's all about. And so if you've got value, I would love to know what that means to you, for you, and what you'll do with it. Please do leave a comment so that I know. And I appreciate you being here today or in the replay. And I hope that you have a phenomenal week ahead of you, and very much look forward to sharing what I discover in my quest for truth. And I look forward to coming to you again next Sunday for sure, and wish you a wonderful week in the meantime. Toodaloo, guys. Thanks a lot.